Good evening, everybody. My name is Greg Alvarez. I am a co-chair of the CB14 Housing and Land Use Committee, along with Melissa Minnick, who's also on board with us as well. So this evening we have a very busy agenda, so I don't want to waste any more time. We already have our first team here today to join us, led by David Rowe of Canva Ventures. He's going to be speaking with us tonight about nonprofit affordable housing development. And at this time, I turn it over to you, David, to lead us off.
David, you're kind of frozen there.
Oh, he might be frozen.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
I'll send him a text
All
and
right.
let him know.
Okay, thank you. In the meantime, welcome to everybody this evening. Thanks for everyone for joining us. I think we have David back. Do we have you back, David? I don't know if you can hear me. All right, just one more minute, everybody, while we work out the.
You're muted right now.
Oh, so he can't hear us.
Okay.
Let him know he's muted.
Yeah, maybe there's a way for at least for him to.
No. Darn it.
Maybe if he can go out and back in. Give that a whirl.
Or he can dial in on the phone. Then we can see him, and then he can just use the audio.
Yep, that would be fine as well.
Okay, he said he's leaving and he's coming back.
Okay, fair enough. One more minute, folks, and then we'll get started with the presentation. Yes.
Okay.
You have rejoined us. That's fantastic.
That's amazing.
All right. At this point, I would like to. No worries at all. I'll turn it over to you, David, and then we'll forget any of that came before. We're starting now. So welcome again, and we appreciate you joining us this evening.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to say I can't see everyone, but I can see a bunch of great people there. So thanks so much. It's always an honor to be speaking to a great community board like CB14. So my name is David Rowe. I'm the CAO of Canva and Canva Housing Ventures. I've been with the agency for just at 18 years. And prior to that, I worked alongside Canva, doing lending to them with Canva Housing Ventures with Corporation for Supportive Housing. So I'm going to quickly just do a real fast overview. I was really honored to be asked to come and talk to you. And I have with me also my team, Francesca and Nico, if you want to just introduce yourselves so everyone knows who's here as well.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Francesca Brown, and I'm Senior Project Manager at Canva Housing Ventures. I'm entering my 8th year with the team, and I'm so excited about what's to come in the future. And I just wanted to say that this community board is very important to me because when I moved back to New York, I spent 10 years living in Community Board 14. So great.
Nice. Hi, my name is Nicholas Reisinger. I'm a project manager at Canva Housing Ventures, and I'm excited to let David present the great things we do.
Great. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about Canva Housing Ventures. I think you guys probably know a lot about us, but just really quickly, I'll say that, Canva is one of the largest social service agencies in New York. There's 6 key program areas which are listed. I won't read them out. You can see them here on the screen, but really the sort of mantra of Canva is our motto, which is Canva where you can. And essentially what that means is we believe that we have the autonomy as leaders in our work that we will create solutions um, for the residents that we serve, whether that's Canva or the programs that need to get created. So Canva has a very can-do attitude. And in short, you can see by the numbers how we reach. We're hitting our 49th year. Next year will be our 50th. So really long legacy of great work started in Brooklyn and now citywide. And really the growth of the agency has been based on the needs of the community. You gonna hit the next slide? So these are just some pictures of some of the things that we do. And then I'll talk about Canva, Housing Ventures. Go ahead, Nico, you hit the next slide. And so essentially in that can-do attitude of Canva, you know, in the 90s, as Canva was doing all the social service work that they were doing, program work, really the need of shelters, which the city came to Canva in the 90s and said, look, we want you to take on shelter work. Sure, the agency started doing that. Then we started doing transitional housing. And then Joanna Puso, legacy, amazing woman, I'm sure everyone knows who she is, sort of stepped up and said, look, we need to create the solution. We need to create permanent affordable housing. So that's where Canva created the affiliate, Canva Housing Ventures. In the first 10 years, the goal of the Canva Housing Ventures, which is when I joined, was to create, 1,000 units in 10 years. Huge, lofty goal. I'll just say a little side story. At that point, I was working at Corporation for Supportive Housing, brought in to work with not-for-profits to help them mainstream developing affordable housing. My background had been in real estate development in Cleveland, then came to New York, and was working with all these large nonprofits to help them do affordable housing. So having at that point, 2005, a nonprofit doing permanent affordable housing development work wasn't very common. Most of the work was being done by for-profit developers. But here we are, we just hit 20 years last year. So these are some numbers of things that we've done. Under my leadership, we've hit like $1.3 billion of leveraging housing, 17 developments. We're in 4 of the 5 boroughs. We have over 3,000 units of housing, and you see the numbers there. Really commitment to high excellence in design and ensuring that people self-actualize. Nico, you want to hit the next slide? So really, we have a really wonderful, unique combination, right? So we have Canva Housing Ventures as developer, Canva social service provider. And really what that means is that we're able to sort of control and sort of manage what often doesn't happen. You usually have a developer who acts on their own. They bring in they bring in, another group that does services for residents. Then they probably bring in a property manager, and then they probably bring in a security provider. Where Canva Housing Ventures, we're the developer, we're also a social service provider, and we are also a security provider. We do have third-party property management, but I have on my team a full group of individuals who manage the property manager. So we have a very engaged and active process on that. So Nico, you can keep going. And so really our approach to development, partnerships, amenity-rich housing, integrate lush seasonal landscape, develop with high quality integrity. And so look, as you can see, lots of gray. I've been around a long time, but when I learned how to do development, it was really related to, and sort of the main thing, which we always say is, you want to develop, and our architects say, well, what do you want to develop? You want to develop something that you would feel comfortable that your mother would live in. And that is the model of our housing. And whether that's your mother, your cousin, your aunt, or someone that you love, that's the sort of impact and mantra that we put into our housing. And you go hit next slide. And so again, just some numbers, our deals, where they're at. You guys can look at this later. I'll keep going. And then this sort of shows you of the quality. So you see 97 Crook, which is there, Morris Manor, which is in, both of them are in CB14. Morris Manor was the first deal we ever did. We've just taken it out of its LIHTC compliance period. But again, will be, our goal is affordability and perpetuity. Some of our larger deals, the Bronx and the other deals, these are some of the interiors that we do. In all of our buildings, not only do we have great amenity rich, finishes, but sustainable. We're doing passive house. We do solar where we can. We really ensure that people feel committed to the space that they're in. We also do a call for art in all of our buildings, which is really wonderful because we get local artists to create and cultivate art in the community and in our buildings. So Nico, you can keep going. The other thing we've done is we've been really fortunate, and this sort of goes back again a long time ago, but there was the Burger Commission report, which is done like around 2005, and really looking at closing hospitals. So Canva and Canva Housing Ventures really took that opportunity to leverage a white paper that Corporation for Supportive Housing did, which is co-locating housing and healthcare. So around 2005, or actually a little bit before that, 2004 or 5, I was working with CSH. They were working with Health and Hospitals Corporation to understand underutilized properties there at Kings County Hospital campus. Canva Housing Ventures was afforded the opportunity to be selected to develop. Now we have 2 buildings on the campus, really co-locating housing and healthcare, because we all know that people tend to not utilize healthcare systems. And so that was the connection for that, stabilizing people and sort of disarming around healthcare. We've just put out a large piece that we'll share with you guys that just got published with a lot of our partners on this model of reuse of underutilized sites. Nico, keep going. So this is Morris Manor. You sort of know it. I'm sure you don't need to see it to know it, but really, I think, as I said, our first deal, Cam Housing Ventures' first deal. I mean, 8 million. What I wouldn't do to build a deal for $8 million today. I mean, it's just absolutely unheard of. But you see the asset and you see the impact and the improvement and the stabilization. In fact, we still have tenants that are the original tenants from when we built the building, which speaks to the commitment of stabilized housing. Nico, you can keep going. Same thing for 97 Crook. This was a site, I actually lent Canva the money to acquire this site out of a bankruptcy sale. Adjacent owner wanted to turn it into a parking lot, but we were able to build 53 units of housing here. Wonderful. Interestingly, which no one really know, but that sort of landscape triangular space in the front is owned by MTA. We actually did an agreement with MTA because we said that everyone's going to think we didn't do something with this front and they're going to yell at us all the time. So we said to MTA, please let us landscape this. We'll maintain it. We'll take care of it. And they said, sure, please take it off our hands, do that. And so we manage that as well. And you can see some interior shots. Again, hardwood floors, really having beautiful masonry and great outdoor spaces for residents to sort of enjoy. And proximity to transit and that space is amazing. Here's Camet Gardens. Again, a really wonderful place, reusing of underutilized hospital property. This is a large deal, 293 units, large site. So you have a really immense part of a backyard. We have a strong connection also to landscape. We think it's really imperative that people have. One of the other tools of things that we design when we develop our housing, when we bring the architect on, we absolutely bring our landscape architect on at the same time. We make them sort of fight it out, if you will, because often landscape is brought in as an after effect. And also often the trees, and I often see a lot of developers, they put the smallest possible tree in for street trees, where we buy and sort of put in real large mature trees because it needs to have that feeling on the ground. But again, you can see the amenity rich space. We do community rooms, teaching kitchens, and all kinds of other opportunity spaces in our buildings. So if you wanted to have a community board meeting, or if the community needed to use that, that's great. In Camet Gardens 1 and Camet Gardens 2, there's also space for the hospital to come in and do health screenings and other mental health space opportunities to connect our residents to. You can keep going. So Clarkson Estates, and so this was a bit of our model of health and housing and how this sort of transitioned. And so I think the work that nonprofits can do, because as feet on the ground, understanding the social service impacts and the social determinants of health, when we were doing Camet Gardens 1 and Camet Gardens 2, One Brooklyn Health and many other groups sort of came together. Lorraine Brown, many people may know her, worked with others to sort of get other groups together, hospitals that had property, and say, look, we should work together. We can leverage our hospital properties for opportunities of development, which is what they did. They created the Vital Brooklyn Initiative, which was based on creating healthcare outcomes for underserved communities. Canva Housing Ventures was fortunate that we've gone after 2 sites which we won. This one is the SUNY downstate parking lots that we won. This is a large deal, 328 units of housing. We have 30,000 square feet of community facility in there as well. It'll be nonprofit leased space. SUNY downstate or some other group may take that space. We're really hopeful to have a really great partner in there. But it'll be great community facility space for the community. There's also an 80-unit parking garage. And the great thing about the Vital Brooklyn initiatives is that it was really built around communities saying what they wanted to have in that, on that site. So it was really a very prescriptive RFP process that we were fortunate enough to beat 15 other for-profit developers to win as the nonprofit developer of it, which that should be TCOing in the next month. So we're really excited about that. On time, on budget, and really beautiful. And keep going, Nico. This is the Bronx Grove. This is our first deal in the Bronx, 323 units. This was a site assemblage that was done. Really, again, that's sort of, I think if we say one thing about our buildings, people always say, is this a senior housing building, or is this a, formerly incarcerated building, or is it, what population lives there? And I think it's just like New York, and that's why I call a lot of our buildings, which is really like the subway model. It's a little bit of everybody. We have seniors, we have vets, we have youth aging out of foster care. We have formerly incarcerated individuals who are living there, and families, homeless families and homeless individuals who are now housed. So it's a really great stabilization. Of course, all of our properties also have social services on site available to everyone in the building. Really is a point of access and referral for people to self-actualize. So again, LEED Gold, all of our buildings sustainable. Really, it's our first Bronx deal. The connection is right there to the Bronx. This was Francesca's project. I should probably let her talk about it. She did an amazing job on it. You can see a little bit of the art. Francesca, you want to say anything else about the building? I'm sort
Yeah,
of
the
rattling on.
building is it's actually two buildings
Yeah.
on one plot. So we have sister buildings that are almost identical, but not quite. The location is a very good area of the Bronx. It's in Bedford Park, near public transportation, walking distance from the Botanical Garden. There's like a bunch of resources in the community, nonprofits that we work with to spread the word about the development to help with lease up. Just a really great neighborhood to be in, right near
Yeah.
Marshallou Parkway.
Yeah, this was an interesting deal. At first, there was some sort of back and forth. We don't know if we want this deal. The neighborhood doesn't really need this. They need something else. And, we did our due diligence and we understood the school at the end. Francesca did a lot of the due diligence and found out that nearly 30% of the students in that elementary school were homeless and living in shelters. And so
Yeah.
we really said, like, this, I know that you say that you don't need this, but we're going to give you some real time data. Also, a lot of buildings were being purchased. I think there's some similarities between a lot of community boards, right? A lot of buildings were being purchased and longtime residents were being pushed out. People were also like double and tripled up in units. So we really helped to stabilize. And Francesca's going to talk about this in a minute, like the numbers of rents. When we went to the community board and we said, listen, no judgments. And I love Francesca always says, find yourself on this page. Find out what your income is and find out what your rent would be. And so the people who didn't and weren't interested all of a sudden said, wow, that would be my rent. Yes, this would be your rent. And then we had essentially unanimous approval for the project, which we're really grateful for. So Nico, we can keep going. Francesca, I'm going to let you go here. You can talk a little bit about this and we can just keep going through the rest.
Okay,
Is that
sure.
okay?
So yeah, that's great. So you've seen a lot of the examples of the wonderful work that we do, these beautiful buildings, these wonderful new homes for people in our communities that we serve. But a lot goes into it before you see the end product. And one of the most important things that we focus on at Canva Housing Ventures is putting together stellar development teams of people and organizations that are just as invested in community well-being, uplifting people who may need additional help, as we are. So we take design very seriously. We take being cost effective very seriously. And so this is just a very light sample of entities and individuals that make up our team, from legal to insurance to accountants to design architects to landscape architects, as David mentioned earlier, furniture suppliers, leasing agents. From A to Z, we make it our business to select people who are very dedicated to creating the best possible housing as possible. Next slide, Nico.
And I'll just say one thing on design before we leave that. We're very active in design decisions, design solutions, and we really are mindful not to let the architect design everything. We know you can get a lot. You can get a great ceramic tile for like $3. You can also get one for, $3,000, but you can find one that looks fantastic for $3 as well. So just being engaged in that process makes a big difference. But these are, I think, some key in the AMIs and stuff.
Yeah. So when you hear people talk about affordable housing, the number one question is affordable to who? And with this slide, I like to just explain to people what AMI is. Take each word: area, a geographic area. The New York City metropolitan statistical area includes all of New York City. It includes Westchester, Rockland, Suffolk, and Nassau counties. That is the area. Median, if we remember grade school, remember mean, median, mode. We're not talking about the most income. We're not talking about the average. Median, middle number. If you line everybody up from the lowest income to the highest, we pick the middle number. That's the median. And income, your paycheck, alimony, disability services, welfare benefits. All of those items come together as your income, and that's how New York City we determine what your income is. So that's just a quick summary of area median income. In this slide, I included links in the event that this spreadsheet, this PowerPoint is shared, so you can click and go to HPD's website. And if you just Google search HPD AMI website, it'll show you household sizes, the income limits, it'll show you average rents, all of the information that you would need to try to figure out where you are in this conversation of affordable to who. Brooklyn Community Board 14, your 2024 AMI was $76,000 pretty much. For New York City, at that same period of time, 100% AMI for one person was $108,000, for two, $124,000, and for three people, $139,000. So you can see it's a little lower than the average of all of those counties that we talked about. So that's kind of where you were in 2024. I tried to get more updated information, but census takes a little while to update the American Community Survey. So 2024 was the most recent information that I could provide. Next slide, Nico. Okay, so this is an excerpt from this year's AMI. Every year, HUD updates these numbers based on those counties that I mentioned earlier. And so every year, HPD, HDC, HCR, they post this information for you. So you can find this pretty much anywhere. So if you look at your family size on the first column, say you're a family of 4. If you make around $145,000, you're 90% of the area median income, meaning you're a bit under the average, under the median for the city of New York. When we're talking about affordability and income bands, we're talking about clustering different categories of your percentage of AMI together. So when we say low income, people just say, oh, well, it's low income. But what does that mean? What does that really mean? Low income, based on this information that HPD provided, if you're between 51 and 80% of the area median income, you're considered low income. But if you're less, say you make 25% of the area median income, you would be extremely low. And then on the other end, say, for example, median or middle income, 121 to 165% of AMI. And in New York City, the term sheets and funding sources cap affordability at 165% AMI. So if you're 166% of AMI, you wouldn't qualify for the development.
And just while we're on this slide, Francesca, I want to just call out to everybody. All of the entire portfolio of Camp Housing Ventures is in the extremely low income to low income. So we do from 30% up to 80% of AMI.
Right. Okay, next slide, Nico. Thank you. So structuring affordable housing. As I was talking about earlier, establishing a team of people to help design the building and pull the concept together. You can do that all day, but if you don't have the financing to actually make it real, it's just going to sit in a computer program or sit in your mind. And so in order to make this work, you need financing from city, from state, from federal resources to put it all together to make what we call a capital stack so that you can develop and create affordable housing. And so one of the resources that we use are subsidy term sheets issued by government organizations like HPD, HDC, HCR, et cetera. And these term sheets have the rules and requirements for them issuing financing for the creation of affordable housing. And these term sheets can include affordability requirements, what specific population they're looking to serve, your income band, design guidelines. I mean, the city even determines how big or small your units can be. So there's a lot that goes into these term sheets, and these items are also available online for you to take a look at. But I have a sample for you right here. Nico, if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is a sample from one of HPD's term sheets from the Supportive Housing Loan Program. And this is a term sheet that I recently used for my project in the Bronx, for the Bronx Grove. And so you'll see that there are affordability requirements. There's limits on what populations can be served. For example, with this, your income averaging for your AMI has to be 80% of the area median income or less, and the average has to be 60% AMI when you total all of the units together, all of the different AMIs for each unit. You have affordability requirements. You have the limits for subsidy. So if you look at the right side of the chart, table 2, it will let you know that if you are working with certain programs or certain types of low-income housing tax credits, you'll get a different subsidy amount based on which populations you choose. Supportive housing, because this is a supportive housing term sheet, there is a clause there that explains that because you are choosing the supportive housing term sheet and you're creating this project, you have to have supportive housing case management on site for the individuals who reside in this building. And you must, make sure you keep contact with them, build a relationship with them, et cetera, so that you understand their needs better, so that you can meet the needs of each resident. So that's an example. And then the last little square on the bottom right, design and construction requirements. There are a range of square footage allocations for different unit types, different rooms in each unit, if it's an efficiency, if it's a studio, et cetera. So all of the housing that you see coming up in your neighborhood, if it's under a affordable housing program, everything in the building is regulated based on a term sheet. Okay, Nico, you can go next. And so I created a list of all of the term sheets here. So just to make it easy, so you can see there is a vast allocation of term sheets. There's funding for different types of housing. You have new construction, you have for seniors, you have renovation term sheets, preservation, and that's in for HPD. You go to HCR, they have LGBTQ plus affirming senior housing. They have public housing preservation, just a variety of different programs to meet the different needs of people who need housing, and that's everybody. So these term sheets cover everybody, which is fantastic that we live in a part of the country that has funding allocated for housing, in addition to your traditional low-income housing tax credits, which is something that everybody across the country has.
All right.
I'll just say thanks. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, everyone.
Thank you very much. And if you can humor us just for a moment, I'm going to reach out to everyone who's on the line here just to see if anyone has any questions for our Canva team, and anything in regards to their projects or anything that they're doing today. So if anyone is interested in asking a question, if you just hit the hand up, then I'll take questions. I see a few. We'll start with Carl.
Cool. Hey, folks, good evening. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Carl.
Excellent. So, good evening. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was awesome. So two things. I had no idea the Morris Homes was one of the houses because I've walked by it a million times, so I had no idea. And so that's so cool to see that. And the other question I have too, I believe the slide said it was 100% owned by CHV, if I remember correctly. So if
Mhm.
that's the case, you may have spoken about this already, but I was just curious. What does that mean that it's 100% owned? Because then I'm thinking, okay, so then does that mean that the other properties are some sort of split of ownership between Canva Housing Ventures and some other party? And what does that mean? So that's my question.
That's a great question, Carl. I will say to your first point, when I moved back to Brooklyn from North Carolina, I walked past Moore's Manor and I wanted to live there. So
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
I understand. It's
Right,
a beautiful
exactly. Yeah,
building.
I'm with you.
So speaking to your point about ownership, when we start these developments, it's a really unique setup in that we have low-income housing tax credits, which in order to obtain those, you're basically receiving funding from an investor for the first 15 years. And then after the 15 years, there's like an exit strategy, or the investor leaves the project, and then the Canva Housing Ventures is the 100% owner from that point on. So it's like a partnership of sorts where
It's an
the
L,
investor,
it's a limited partnership through an
yeah,
HDFC. So for every deal, every low-income housing tax credit deal that's done, as Francesca hit on, these deals are a bit of a public-private partnership. And
Mhm.
so the tax credit investor is in for 15 years. That's how they take annual tax credit write-offs. And then
Okay.
after the 15 years, the investor exits the partnership. And then you still have other covenants, other restrictions to keep it affordable, because every deal has multiple sources of funding, and so
Okay.
you're obligated to sort of hold that. It just has a different structure, but it's still owned by the entity through an HDFC, Housing Development Fund Corporation, essentially. So when we
Got you.
say CHV, we're being a bit general, to be very honest, and so
Mhm.
our job is through the HDFC. We still own and manage that.
Got you. Cool. Thank you both for answering that question. I really appreciate it. That's awesome.
no
Absolutely.
problem.
Thank you for seeing the building.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can't miss it. It's right there on the corner off of Newkirk. Like I walk
yeah,
by it
yeah,
all the
yeah,
time. So yeah,
yeah.
can't miss it. Yeah.
Great.
All right, great. So we have a few more questions before we let you go. We have our co-chair, Melissa Minnick, if you'd like to ask your question.
Sure.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for this presentation. This has been fantastic. So my disclaimer is I worked in supportive housing for many years, doing both direct service and then on the fundraising side. So
Great.
all of it,
Right.
all of it. Fantastic. But one of the things I'm actually wondering, I know for all of it, for the planning, for the being there on the day-to-day, around supportive housing in particular, these really aren't short-term tenants that you're thinking about and planning for. So in New York City, I mean, all around us, we have essentially naturally occurring retirement communities. I'm wondering what you're really doing, if you could have any examples of ways that, aside from the senior specific
Hmm.
housing, that Canva is working to, yeah, I guess just like kind of
Sure.
prepare for the future, prepare for your tenants, your residents to be there long
Sure.
term.
Yeah. It's a great question. And I think, our intention is that, we design and develop assets and buildings and homes for people to age in community. That's what we say. We look for people to age in community, not just our residents. And so for that reason, we design around ensuring that we have building finishes that can take wear and tear, that people, we have buildings that are handicap accessible. So we do all kinds of things to ensure that people really are set up to succeed. And I think that's where the social services are really just that amenity rich to that success, which is they're there, they're there Monday through Friday or multiple other opportunity times. And so they see what's happening and they are connected to the residents there. Even the non-formerly homeless units, they're connected to all the residents. So they see where people are sort of going. And I think we've sort of been fortunate to have our residents stay in place. So I think, simple, good design standards really do put in place universal design, which allows for people to sort of age in their unit. And our units are set up to be adaptable as well. So that's what we do. And we want our people to stay,
Okay, thank you for
I
that.
hope that answered your question.
Oh, it did. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And we do have we have two more questions. Barden, if you'd like to ask your question, please go ahead.
Okay, first tell me, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Martin.
Great. The question is, what can we as a board do to make it easier for your organization in particular and similar organizations in general to develop affordable housing in our district?
Well, that's a great question. Make it easier. Well, I don't know about making it easier. I think one of the things I see is just like holding people accountable to really good design standards, because I do think as owners, it's really imperative that we don't just build buildings. Like our mantra is also every day is day one. You can go into our buildings and they look exactly the way they do from day one. And that's because we have a maintenance program. We have that. So I think it's about holding developers accountable to the assets that they're developing. But I would say, look, we'd love to do more work in CB14. You guys have been a great partner to us. I think often as developers, we don't often know what are the availabilities. So, if, I think the city does a great job of like having these preferred developers and you get on a list or they reach out to you, but there's so much information that it's sometimes often hard as a developer in, we're sort of neighbors, if you will, right? To know what's available. So, you have the opportunity to say, these are the preferred people we want working in our community. We trust them, we know them, we like them. So why not set up a preferred list that you'd like? You're not doing anything, I think, to hurt anybody. Again, I'm just saying this. I could be absolutely wrong. But maybe that could be a preferred way to do something about the people you want to have working in your district.
That's interesting because developers, well, unscrupulous ones are notorious for promising everything up front, when they're trying to get the approval.
Correct.
And very rarely do we ever, go back 2 years, 5 years, subsequently to check whether or not they've honored their, obligations and commitments.
Well, you could actually plug in a piece when you're giving approvals that you're going to mandate them to give you an audit of that and give you biannual reports and images. Like there's nothing wrong with holding people accountable. I mean, we often welcome, that's why we create spaces in our buildings. We welcome the community board to come and see it. We welcome people to come and tour. We often are doing that because it speaks well. Because we want to be welcomed and asked to come back. We give you a rendering and then we give you the finished project and they're the same. There's a lot of bait and switch that happens, and sometimes things can modify because of cost or other reasons, but then you have to come back and say why things change, right? It's about being accountable, because at the end of the day, we've been fortunate enough to, like, even some other places that like didn't want us at the beginning. Francesca knows,
Yeah,
but then at
lost it.
the end they were like, thank you, we really learned a lot working with you. Like when we talk about landscape architect up front, that's mandatory, because you want to have green streets, you want to have greenery, because that's the stuff that everyone sort of participates in, whether you live in that building or not, as a
And
community.
they love, like David said, they love touring the buildings and just, showing, the different members of the community board how beautiful our buildings are, how people are, living and active and being productive in our spaces. So it's good.
And like, what are the other things that they could do for the community? Like, Can you do a call for art? Can you do local art in the buildings? Like what are the amenities that are unique to CB14 that you can do? Like there's so many, like look at, my God, why am I blanking on the name of the street with all the great restaurants? My God, my brain is, I keep wanting to say Newkirk. It's not Newkirk. What's all
For
the,
tell
tell
you.
you.
Or tell you,
or tell you,
Yes.
thank you.
Mhm.
Like, look, you guys, how can you coordinate? What can you do connection to Cortellu, right? Like, there's so many great things that people naturally could do. Could you do a community drop off for, residents, like, and for greenery, like CSA drop off? Would you be open to that? Like, there's so many great partnership things that I think a lot of these larger developers, which they have tremendous amount of assets that they could be doing to leverage more community buy-in together, which I think could be helpful.
Mhm.
great, thank you. What a complete answer. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. And we have one more question. Is that Sean or is that someone else
It's
over at the
me.
district office? Okay, go ahead, Sean.
It's Sean. Thanks. Just for those of you not keeping track of the chat, there's a fun fact in there that one of your fellow past board members was the architect on Morris Manor.
Yes.
So it is
Cindy Hard. Yes.
that's her, yeah. Special place. And Barton asked part of my question. So, and I think it's really keep that answer in mind as we go to the next presentation, because there's also what is available in our district. Where do we have space to meet some of the needs that we've identified over the years? And that brings me to my one question, which is, does Canva, to the extent that we have a terrible statistic in terms of 800 housing code violations per 1,000 units in CD14, almost 300 per 1,000 serious housing code violations, mostly concentrated in, the same buildings over and over again. Does Canva interact, or are there programs for, now I'm blanking on better words in this, but
No,
taking
I know,
over, or sort
like
of
code
like,
enforcement, and yeah,
yeah,
you're talking about code
or
enforcement.
just becoming the, sort of buying out a landlord that doesn't have the capacity, and turning one of the 10 worst landlord buildings into a wonderful Canva building.
Yeah. Francesca, I mean, like Francesca's a
Yeah,
great background coming from HPD, so maybe you want to start with this. I have some ideas too. It's a bit of
yeah.
carrot and stick, right?
Yeah. So as David mentioned, I worked earlier in my career at HPD in new construction finance. And I do know that sometimes in the preservation department, when there are buildings that are really plagued assets with lots of violations, and they are funded by the city, and it's very difficult to get the violations cleared. Sometimes the city offers an opportunity to a reputable developer to take over the building and make the repairs using their programs and term sheets to bring everything up to code. I don't think that happens very often, and it has to be very dire straits for that an asset to be taken away from a development team and given to another. But it is possible that does happen a lot of times. What I will also recommend is speaking with people at HPD about this, since you have the data
Yeah.
of oh, okay, hand up, I saw it. All right, I get it.
No,
Okay.
I didn't mean to wave you off, though. I value your experience, and could certainly circle back on, or stick around for Sarah's next presentation about, our attempts.
Yes. I think I'll do that, just to hear what's going on. But there are resources out there for landlords to bring buildings up to code. As I showed you in part of my presentation, the different term sheets. There's a whole list of term sheets for preservation that are used to revitalize assets, bring units up to code, bring building systems up to code. There are resources out there, and I'm not sure if
But
people
that sort of
know.
assumes that you kind of just want
Yeah.
to jump in quickly, but that assumes that you have an owner there's an owner who's allowed those code violations to exist. So I would say like it's the carrot and stick approach, which is also then what is the engagement with the tenants that you might want to engage, that they become a bit more activated, and help that asset, because that does bring down the community.
Thank you
Yeah.
both. It's a struggle. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. We're here
Thank
if you need
you.
anything. Happy to hear if you have needs in the community that we could be helpful for. I mean, definitely would love to do more development work in the community.
We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, David, Francesca, and Nico, for
Thank
that
you.
great presentation tonight.
Okay.
Nice
Thank
to
you guys.
meet you all. Take care.
Take care. Bye
Very
bye.
good. All right, we're going to move on to our next agenda item. At this point, I'm going to transition and turn it over to Melissa to take us from here. So, Melissa, by all means, take it away.
Well, thank you so much. And yeah, just echoing everything I think we've already heard. That was a fantastic presentation. So thank you, everybody from Canva. But our next presenter that's going to be Annie Larkin. She's our planning fellow with the Fund for the City of New York, and she's going to be giving us a presentation on the updates on City of Yes, the impact on CB14. So Annie, all yours.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. And then, all right, can everyone see that?
Yes. That's
Okay,
good.
great. Well, thank you for having me tonight. I'm Annie. I'm the fellow from the Fund for the City of New York, and I'm going to give my project update on City of Yes and Community Board 14. To run over briefly again, my project is asking how will City of Yes impact Community District 14, and what would a maximalist map look like with all the applied zoning changes? I've been focusing mainly on demographic and housing stock composition, and then I've been looking at soft sites to see where development potential could be. And finally, I've been looking at ADU creation and building height to see how neighborhood character could change. So for soft sites, I've been comparing the built FAR to the zoned FAR to find development where there would be potential gaps for development. For ADU creation, I found all applicable lots where ADUs were legally allowed to be constructed. And then for character change, I compared new height allowances to existing buildings to get a sense of growth. I use QGIS RStudio, Google Earth, and Zola for my analytical approach, and then a lot of New York City local data. For a brief overview, which I'm sure some of this is very familiar, Community District 14 has a population of just short of 150,000 people. The median household income is 76,422, and there's about 16.7% of people who live below the poverty line. Kind of the map on the right shows the distribution of the median household income depending on census groups. Community District 14 has nearly 67,000 units. 76% are renter occupied, and about 88% of structures are multi-unit. There's been 53 new units since 2020, and majority have been built in the medium density R7 zone, which we can see kind of mainly along Ocean and on the right side of Northern Flatbush. The median value of an owner-occupied housing unit is just shy of $1 million. Yeah, and the map on the right just shows, you can see it's all North Flatbush and a little bit Midwood where the new construction is bubbling up. I analyzed the distribution of rental unit sizes and rents within the districts. Studios and 1-bedrooms are the fastest growing unit size in new construction, and 3 beds have decreased slightly as compared to studio 1 beds and 2 beds. I also analyzed the income and rent burden within the district. High income households that are making 100 to 200 plus are the fastest growing demographic in the district, while households under 50K have been decreasing. Households who are making 50 to 100K are also increasing within the district, but they are also becoming the most rent burden group over time. So this is a map of soft sites looking at where there might be development potential. The red lots, which we can see are kind of significantly below the zoned FAR. And this has been mainly in Flatbush, along Flatbush Ave, around Kensington and in North Midwood. 60% of lots in the district are underdeveloped, especially in medium density zones like R6 and R7. Previously, DCP has expressed interest in rezoning the northern part of Coney Island, which seems to be on the back burner for now, but that kind of area could see potential height increases. And the 1455 Coney Island Avenue rezoning, which is not a residential building but has heights of 9 stories, could be precedent for how kind of much bigger these buildings could get. On the left is a maximalist map of ADU creation. So I mapped all of the possible lots that could qualify for ADUs, which is around 7,000 overall. I did not include the 2 potential historic districts within this just because it hasn't passed yet. While this map does show all the possible ADU locations, I think high costs of retrofits and construction, as well as the long timeline for retrofits, I think would still remain a barrier. So that's something for kind of a potential further conversation. The visuals on the right show different kinds of ADUs. So it could be, a backyard extension, it could be the attic, it could be the basement. I also mapped all the city-owned properties in the district, which excludes kind of subway stations, schools, parks, libraries, and public safety buildings. There are around 20 city-owned properties, 3 of which are existing tenanted buildings. So these sites could be potential sites for affordable housing development or other uses. I also wanted to include the 2 new historic districts that might be approved or are in the process, Ditmas Park West and Beverly Square West. So ADUs cannot be built in these districts, and due to underlying zoning, they're also exempt from transit-oriented development and universal affordability preference. These are the 2 maps showing location of building heights for transit-oriented development and where it's applicable on the left. So you can see that building heights of 35 feet, kind of roughly 3-story buildings, 55 is going to be around 5-story buildings, and the way this is distributed in the district. Finally, character change. I wanted to visualize character change, especially for building heights for transit-oriented development. On the left, on E16th, are 2 single-family homes that are zoned R3. R3 can see building heights of up to 35 feet for multifamily units. You can see that this wouldn't be much bigger than these existing buildings. The visual on the right is another way of thinking about this. For universal affordable preference, this is going to allow building heights to increase in R6 and R7 zones, which is around 6 to 9 stories. UAP will allow developers to add 20% in height, which is around 1 to 2 floors. So these are 2 buildings on Beverly Road. 1815 is 68 feet. So let's say this has kind of been going to be rebuilt and the developer wants to add UAP, it would increase by 13 feet, which would give it another story. Ultimately, UAP will allow buildings to grow up to 11 stories in R6 to R7 zones. After looking at all of this, my main conclusions is that City of Yes will not have significant character impact on low density areas in the district. Building heights will not increase above 5 stories, and there are already many multifamily buildings of this height that pre-exist. So there's not going to be huge towering changes. There is, however, a strong possibility of ADU creation within these low density areas. And if homeowners do choose to pursue this, it could add some density. Finally, by many estimates, property values could increase surrounding IBX once it's built, because that is going to be incorporated into the transit-oriented development, and then in R1 to R4 zones with the added ADU creation, which is something to think about long-term. Thank you for listening, and I wanted to leave some feedback for any questions about the project, or any feedback in general.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Annie. Did anybody have any questions? Anything specifically about this? see a lot of applause. I think it was a lot of information all at once. So
Yeah, it's a lot of
it's
information.
a lot. I'm still processing some of this and just thinking about like, okay, so there and there and yeah. But I think
Christy put a hand up, and I think Rosine was
Yeah.
trying to put a hand up if I saw that gesture properly.
yeah. So we'll go with Kirsty.
Here we go. Hi. Hi, that was wonderful. I've been following City of Yes very closely since the year of its public review and adoption. And I had a wonderful conversation with you, Annie, a month or two ago about your work in progress. It's fantastic. I had a question about the very last square, which was, you were saying that property values would increase as a result of when the IBX is likely approved, you know. Do you mean by that that the IBX will then create a transit-oriented development category near the IBX rail line, which then will allow denser development, which will then make the land more valuable? Could you expand on that a little? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for our conversation a couple months ago. Yes, that is what I meant. I think they could, obviously I can't predict the future, but I think they could increase. And I wanted to include that because I know some of the conversations I've had have been thinking around property values. But because IBX has yet to been built, I think it's safe to assume that, like from studies that I've read about rezonings in general, and with transit-oriented development, that the land near there will increase in value. And so that's something to, I think about long term. Like if
Yes,
you want to think about affordability or increased density.
yes, okay. I understand why you, in others, I agree, and I also understand why it's a general statement. It's not something that you can quantify, but it's something we should be looking ahead about. Thank you. All right.
Thank you. Regine, did you?
Yes, and thank you, Annie, for the presentation. I had a question about the slide called character change in CD14. You mentioned, I think you showed homes that were zoned R3X, but then I think you might have referred to them as R3. And perhaps Kirsty can talk about this with more specificity than me, but R3X is, of course, a sub-district of R3 that has some different requirements for height, if you're able to build up to the lot line or not, if it has a yard, which in our community often means that there's street trees there. You may know CD14 has the least amount of park space in New York City, so a lot of times our street trees become our only green space for the community. So a building that builds right up to a lot line is really depriving the community of the ability to have green space. So I think it's worth noting the difference between, and that's why, you know, when I heard R3, but I read R3X, I just wanted to be sure that that difference was really paid attention to, because it impacts our, among other things, our green space. And there's also, if I'm remembering what Kirsty has shared before, a difference with the roof line. So in the image that you shared, I don't know if you can put it back on the screen.
Yes, I can do that.
Yeah, a big block building, as you show in the example. I know that I can see that, you know, they're both 35 feet tall, but in looking at our residential context and our existing community of homes with pitched roofs, having a big flat square, whether it's made of glass and aluminum or brick, is does, I would say, does have a real material effect in how the community looks, feels, the temperature of, again, if you're up to the lot line. So I think that those, when we're looking at this, I think the details do matter. And I think that it's worth really drilling down to those differences and to show the realities even in the renderings, to make sure that we're talking about the possibility of what's allowed, because it's not often as I think Bardin said in our previous presentation, it's not often that a developer will say, well, I could build up to the lot line and have no street trees, but I will choose to leave a lawn and leave space for a street tree.
No, thank you for your comment. And I had not kind of thought about the green space aspect and the tree aspect. So I'm definitely gonna, I think moving forward, keep that in mind. My understanding with TOD is that the lot can only be 5,000. I mean, maybe it says it. Oh, I don't have it written down. That the lot have to be 5,000 feet, as well as on the short end or on a wide street. So I think it also means that there's not many lots that will be applicable for that. Which was part of my thinking for saying that I think the change is not going to be too drastic. But I'm going to keep that in mind for moving forward. So I think that's a really good point about the
Yeah,
green
thank
space.
you. I'm
Thank you.
happy to share that someone in the community did an analysis of all of the lots that could be impacted. As you mentioned, it is 5,000 square feet, but streets that they consider a wide street in this context even include streets we think of as narrow streets like Dorchester Road, This Avenue, most of the east-west streets in our community that are purely residential. And then with just one other comment, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
I realize in one of the earlier slide you mentioned and showed like a heat map of the new housing that's been created and the housing the slide labeled housing stock in my note. Yeah, it's just worth noting in a community like ours where we have existing older housing stock that it's equally as important to look at the number of units that are available, that have been continuously available in some cases for 120 years, and not solely focus entirely on new housing, because housing that's been built built well in 1905 and housing families since then should be as high on our priority list as housing that is built and maybe has a 20-year shelf life in some cases because they're not building them like they used to in some cases. And I think it's really important to look at the spots that maybe are not so bright on the heat map and realize it's not that housing is blocked there, it's not that housing is unwanted or unwelcome there, but rather it's that quality housing exists there and families have been living there for generations in existing quality homes and cohesive communities. I think that that's something that's sometimes left out when we're talking about housing, when we talk only about the number of new housing units created. And to your other point, when you mentioned the type of housing that's being created in your rent and rental unit size slide, I am heartbroken to see that the number of 2 bedrooms has decreased. I believe it because I experience it and I hear it and I see it. But when we focus so strongly and solely on the number of new units created, things like the number of usable units created can fall to the wayside. And we have families that need 2 bedroom apartments, 3 bedroom apartments, and what we're building is 1 bedroom apartments and studio. And I love this graph. This is some new data to me that I hadn't seen presented in this way. So I thank you. But just seeing the number of studios in 1 bedrooms, knowing that what our community needs is two bedrooms and 3 bedrooms is really stark. And I really appreciate you calling that out. When we see families living in New York City, it's because they had a second kid and they live in a 1 bedroom. And 2 bedrooms don't exist, whether you're talking about new units or not. So thank you for that. And I'll give back the floor.
Thank you for your comments. I also just wanted to add that these are only up to 2023 because that's as much data as I have. And the new census data just hasn't been released quite yet. It was supposed to be in January. So I think we can also think there's going to, it's 2026. We're a little bit lagging behind in data, but this is why it's up to 2023. But thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you. I think Barden.
Oh, sorry to barge in again. Like what I found most interesting is I think you'd said that there's the possibility of as many as 14,000 new units developed on the basis of ADUs and soft sites. So I believe you said you feel that there's a sort of an infrastructure impediment to the development of the ADUs, and that would move along much more slowly. But if we wanted to encourage, say, extra affordable housing development in our district, that we should focus on those soft sites. Is that sort of a reasonable interpretation?
The ADU creation, yeah, so there's 7,194 possible lots that qualify for having legal creation. Now, if these two historic districts get approved, that's going to decrease by a little bit. I do think just in general, the cost of building and the
Retrofitting, right?
timeline retrofitting can just be barriers. Doesn't mean it's impossible to happen, but I think it's just something that's important to think about. Like, it's not going to be, it's not like all 7,000 are going to be built within the next year or two. But I think it's a potential for both kind of increasing density and increasing affordable housing, as well as giving income to homeowners if they rent out their ADUs. The development potential, I was interested in thinking more about where is it possible, like where can we see a difference between what is built and what could be built. And so let's say a developer came in and bought a property, where could heights increase? A lot of these sites are already existing buildings, or are there public schools, or they're, police stations or libraries. So it's not even just that they're all residential housing,
Also,
but
a
I just wanted to
classic
kind of,
is like the side of Coney Island Avenue, where it's all low garages, etc.
yeah,
And that's just the kind of corridor that would be ripe for, as you said, upzoning in the eyes of DCP.
exactly. So this is why I wanted to include the city-owned land part, because generally city-owned land, it's easier to build affordable housing there. And so there are 20 lots within the district, 3 already operated by HPD, but it's something to consider, I think, when thinking long term about also, park. I mean, there could be other uses, park development, etc. But
Well, sure. I mean, if you add the ADUs and the soft sites, you get 14,000, which is a 20% increase in the total housing stock of CB14. So that's a pretty significant increase. So thank you. Like I said, that was one of the more interesting insights that you created. And thank you again for all the work you've done.
thank you.
Greg.
Thank you. And yes, thank you for this presentation. Thanks for all your work so far on this. It's been fantastic. It's sort of been alluded to, but I wanted to ask it sort of, a different way. We were talking about wide streets and the 5,000 square foot requirement, because there was, much hay about that during the City of Yes consideration process. So what of the concept of combined lots? Something that is that something we should think about or be aware of as well, in terms of where current lot sizes may not allow for further density in these locations, but the opportunity for, say, combining a couple of lots together to get there, and then maybe creating more density in that regard. Have you seen anything on that front yet, in terms of perhaps even where it's happening practically, or people are taking advantage of that, or maybe we you don't think that that's something that will necessarily happen moving forward? Just wondering your thoughts on that.
Thank you for the question. That is not something I have come across when I was doing a lot of my research, but so that's something I would need to look into further. But I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't be possible. Like if someone had bought a bunch, like combined a bunch of lots together.
Okay.
But I think, I mean, I haven't seen precedent for it.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Not sure. Do we have any other questions?
I have one other quick comment or just point of clarification. Oh, no.
No.
Oh,
Go for it.
just for ADUs, I believe they are they are possible in landmark districts, just not perhaps all of the detached ADUs. But at least 3 of the 4 images that you showed would be allowed, is my understanding. The attic, the basement, the retrofitting an existing garage, but I think it's just not building a new structure on the property.
My understanding is that if it's in a pre-existing structure, it will be legal. I've been seeing very conflicting things about ADU creation in historic districts. Like on their own, like in City of Yes's own words, they say it's only detached. And then there's other research I've said that they're outlawing everything. So I honestly something I've been a little bit confused about. So thank you for bringing that up. But that is definitely the language they use in their marketing, that it's just attached. But then
Right.
if
And
you kind of further, they say none of it's allowed unless it's pre-existing.
And it will be, we can certainly facilitate any outreach to Annie for any follow-up questions or comments that you want to share as she concludes her projects.
I'll share my email in the chat.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Annie. Thank you for all of this. It was fantastic to see tonight. We still have one more. Oh, sorry, did you want to say?
I say thank you for having me.
Well, of course. I'm just gonna say we have one more presenter for tonight, and that is our own Sarah Sklaw as well. And she's our, those who maybe don't know, she's the community coordinator for Community Board 14. If you don't already know her, you should, just saying. But she is going to be presenting on tenant support and resources. So important things for all. Yeah, Sarah, all yours.
Great. So thank you all so much. And also, Annie's wonderful. She's been in the office lately, and it's been a really great source of information. And we've certainly knocked ideas around just in terms of, what this could look like. But let's talk about some of what we do for the folks who are in the neighborhood now and some of the really big challenges that people are facing. This presentation is really going to be like kind of laser focused on what are the different agencies that we work with and what do we do for tenants. I'm in the office, so any other questions you have, always feel free to reach out to me about. I love a research project as well, but let's go through it. So we, as a community board, we're the liaison between residents and city agencies and some non-city agencies as well as community organizations. I've highlighted the main agencies that we work with in terms of housing, but there are more. So housing preservation and development is obviously the big one. They do in this context, we're mainly talking about code enforcement. The department, I actually think it's the division, and I mess that up, but the Division of Housing and Community Development, which is our state level agency, and they, in this context, I'm largely going to be talking about their role in rent regulated, so that's stabilized and controlled housing. The Department of Buildings obviously oversees construction, but because they're also involved in the structural aspects of existing buildings, they come up in elevators, scaffolding and sidewalk sheds, which are often on people's mind. And then the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, as well as the Department of Sanitations, are 2 agencies that are not always the prime when we're talking about housing, but in terms of quality life, cleanliness, rodent issues, those are 2 of our partners as well. So HPD and maintenance complaints, a lot of what we do, and I'm going to talk about this. I was thinking I would do it a little bit in terms of like how we escalate issues, but I am going to jump around in terms of severity. But I would say that when folks come to us with housing issues, this is where I start. So any complaint that you put into 311 for a housing issue then is kept tracked in HPD's website, which is really helpful to know because actually tracking a complaint through 311, as much as I in the office am always telling you to file a 311, is not always the easiest. And so in addition to yeah, it's the repository for those complaints. It's also where the violations are kept. So when somebody reaches out to us about a building, in addition to assisting them in just like filing as the 311 complaints for their specific maintenance issues, I will also go and review how many complaints and violations are in the system as well. This can also be really helpful with things like heat and hot heat complaints, because it's quite difficult actually to get a heat complaint registered as a heat violation. Just thinking about this in terms of a little bit of research I did over the winter when we had this extreme cold spell, our district got something like 1,200 heat complaints, heat and hot water complaints, across 400 different buildings. And 40 of those buildings, when I ran the math on them, actually received a heat or hot water violation during that period. And then about the same amount, like 30 to 40, had received heat or hot water complaints in the past, like 12 months, 6 months. Because of the way heat complaints work, you're not going to get a violation on your building every time the heat goes out, because HPD actually has to be there to take the heat. So take the heat reading. So HPD is like the main repository that we're working with. They're often an agency that we're collaborating with to try and coordinate inspections as well. Once a complaint goes into the system, HPD contacts the landlord. They also perform inspections. If during their inspection they see violations of the housing code, that then becomes a housing code violation. And depending on the severity of the violation, they go from A, which is the least severe, to C, which is the most severe. There is a designated period of time that the landlord has to fix that violation in. And if they don't, another violation can be layered on top of it. And if HPD comes back and looks at the same unit 3 times within 12 months, they will impose a fee of $200. There are some other HPD sort of specific enforcement programs, which I can talk about a little bit later. Division of Housing and Community Renewal, like I said, they oversee our rent regulated stock, and there are 3 main forms that we often help people fill out, because bureaucracy is not everyone's game, but it is mine. And those are rent reductions for individual apartments based on decreased services, rent reductions for building-wide decreased services, and rent overcharges. So as an example, if I have an apartment and there's a giant hole in the ceiling and that hole has been communicated to the landlord and the landlord has not fixed it, I can then, and it's in my apartment specifically, I can file a rent reduction for an individual apartment with the HCR. DHCR then evaluates whether or not that is what's called a rent impairing violation. And if they do, they issue an order that says that my rent cannot be increased. So even during these regular annual rent guidelines board increases, until that issue is fixed. This is supposed to be a financial incentive on landlords to fix their buildings. Now, if I am in a building and let's say all of the tiles in the lobby are broken and there's large amounts of trash buildup and there's clear, other issues that are in the public spaces, then I would be filing a rent reduction for building-wide services. I think these are actually the trickiest, because the thing about them is, say I live in a 100-unit building, if I am the only person who signs on to my complaint about there being a building-wide issue, the rent reduction, if it's granted, only applies to me. So to actually have an impact on the landlord, you really need to get as many residents as possible to sign on to these. You want the highest percentage of your residents possible. in a way that it can actually be very advantageous to sort of, you also have to notify your landlord before you do any of this, right? DHCR asks, have you notified the landlord? You have to include usually a certified mail receipt showing that you've relayed these complaints already. And if you haven't, they will then give your landlord more time to address the problem. And then the third is a rent overcharge. These I have seen, I'll give you one example of somebody who was not credited with like 4 years worth of a DRE credit. So that meant that the city was in fact paying the landlord $16,000 in a disability rent exemption that was then not passed along to the tenant, who was still being told that they had to pay what was the like base rent. In those cases, you file a rent overcharge complaint. And there are other conditions where that can happen too. If your landlord is charging you a amount higher, like if you have a rent regulated apartment, but the landlord is illegally renting it at market rent, you can then do a retroactive rent reduction order. And I'm sorry, I'm going to try and run through these kind of quickly because I know we're short on time and this is recorded. And like I said, I'm in the office. The Department of Buildings, as I mentioned before, Department of Buildings does structural things. Often that's the elevator. And one of the things that I know I have personally pushed the Department of Buildings on is to increase the actual issuing of fines and the level of severity around fines. If the elevator has gone out 4 times in the last year, which we would never actually get for violations for because they're really hard to get them there at the right time. I don't see why it should be more than $600 for that outage, but that's a different story we can come back to. But also things like often there will be complaints that are related to construction, or I know that we get public safety concerns about scaffolding, or really their sidewalk sheds that remain up beyond the either a building just doesn't perform the work that they need to perform, and so the scaffolding stays up, or they finish the work and then they just don't take the scaffolding down, and that gives people a place to loiter outside, and that can often be a concern for people. So I will both put in complaints to the Department of Buildings and then like really harangue people and be like, hey, you have a permit to do this. Why isn't the work happening? Or I see that the letter of completion has been done. So like chop chop, it's been signed off on. Let's get this all wrapped up. Department of Sanitation, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Call me about rats. We deal with rats all the time, every day. The Department of Health and DOHMH has this really handy tool, which is a rat map. So they log all of their inspections at a particular property. Purple means it has been inspected, I think in the last 6 months, it might be 12, and rat activity was located. Green means it was inspected in that period and rat activity was not. Dark gray means that they were there in the past but haven't done an inspection recently, and the light gray means it hasn't been. And if you fidget and sort of play around with the tool, you can see the entire property history. So that is like whether it was inspected recently, whether Department of Health laid bait, which in general they want the landlord to do, but if the landlord's really negligent on that front, they will put some bait down. And then trash is always like, this is one of those, where is it? Because it impacts, right? So if your trash is overflowing and it's kept in a courtyard behind your building, that is an HPD complaint. But if your trash is overflowing and it's visible from the street, then we can have DSNY go and check out the situation. And when the Department of Health inspects for rats, one of the things that they will include in their notice that goes to the property owner has to do with garbage set out, if that's an issue that's contributing to a rat population. Okay, so here's some of the research and just like tracking that we try and keep track of in the office. So we use Airtable for our service delivery, which is just keeping track of everything that people call us to bring up as an issue. Within that, I also keep a running list that I just call our problem buildings. So our problem buildings include any building that is in alternative enforcement program or has been in the alternative enforcement program in the past. The alternative enforcement program is a heightened alternative enforcement model that HPD has. The like bare metrics is that you need to have at least 3 violations for every unit. Realistically, I see buildings with 10 violations per unit that do not make this AEP list. But when a building is brought into AEP, which happens in the beginning of every year, January or February annually, that building then goes through like a roof to cellar inspection where HPD registers all of the issues that they find, and there is increased enforcement in terms of getting those violations cured and cleared and off the books. Some buildings manage to, get out of AEP within 6 months of getting into the program. That's like a really big success story. Other buildings stay on the AEP list for years and years. Those are buildings. Now there's overlap. They're not always one is the other and one the other is one. But you're maybe familiar with the worst landlord list that is put out by the public advocate every year. We had the dishonor this year of having 80 Woodruff, which was #1 on the worst landlords list, is actually in our building. So our beloved former chair, Carl, was there with the public advocate and really got to see firsthand some of the conditions that people are living in. Like, the worst landlord is not my landlord who like won't do anything about the like 3 mice that have taken up, uh, they're my new tenants. They don't pay rent. The worst landlord is like the ceiling is falling on your head, right? There's mold growing all over the bathroom. There are, often buildings will have vacant units that then become squatters. Anyway, so we keep track of these, and that way when a complaint comes in, it kind of gets pinged if it's related to one of these buildings. I know that I also added buildings that were part of the Pinnacle settlement to this building. If this list, if it didn't, they come about sort of independently. We do a little bit of eviction prevention in our office as well. So New York is great in that we have a right to counsel. That means that if, you get an eviction notice posted on your door when you go to housing court, and you're under a certain income, and also you have other extenuating factors, like if you're a senior, everyone, you can speak to a lawyer, and then there are lawyers who are like public advocate world who will be assigned to your case. I will say we do not have enough lawyers, so lots of people go to housing court and they just aren't enough. Like, it's literally like you're not in the door. They're like, we can't take your case. We're full up for the day. The most important thing that I tell people when they come in having received eviction notices is to not leave. There is an actual, like, eviction is a legal process. It is often very long. And there is a process that you can go through to both, get assistance with any back rent in certain cases. These are not foolproof, but often also people who are taken to housing court have really severe housing maintenance issues, and to get those addressed as well. And then sometimes I like to just check out some of our buildings. This is a screenshot from NICEF, which is the court's website. And you can actually look up all of the eviction cases by a building or by a landlord, because those court records are public. And so we can use that, and I will often look at that. If we have a building that's coming to our attention for other reasons, I might look and see, are they also filing a lot of evictions? That can be like something to sort of red flag. This is a really straightforward form that we are always happy to do, which is SCREE and DREE, your senior citizen and disability rent increase exemptions. These take about 20 minutes. They're pretty straightforward. SCREE is if you're over 62, DREE is 18 or older, and with an awarded disability. So SSDI, some of the other ones. And you can get it, so your rent, what you pay in your rent, and you make under 50 grand a year, or your household has under $50,000 a year, your rent does not go up. The city's Department of Finance issues a tax refund to the owner of your building for the difference. I just want to call out a couple of our excellent neighborhood tenant and housing organizations because we don't do this work alone. Um, so the Flatbush Tenant Coalition, which is part of the Flatbush Development Coalition, is a really great resource in our neighborhood. Brooklyn Housing and Family Services. Oh, wow, I clearly don't look at the sub bar there. But they're real neighborhood stalwarts with a real depth of information and knowledge. And we will often both reach out to them just with questions. I didn't put on here NHS Brooklyn, which is another really fantastic organization, and then some larger organizations like at the city level. So Fifth Avenue Committee, which is committed to advancing economic, social, and racial justice, and is Melissa's former employer. And they also do tenant organizing. I think their catchment area is still largely not quite getting to Flatbush, but a really big source of information. And then Churches United for Fair Housing, which often staffs like housing events at city council members' offices. So also that's, our elected representatives throughout the district have both, dedicated events and dedicated in-house staff who address these issues as well. So I know that I think Assemblymember Cunningham has Tenant Thursdays. Councilmember Rita Joseph's office has like the NILAG van come by pretty often. You can always look at our community resource page for things like that. And if you're like, I need to talk to a lawyer now, give us a call and we can try and connect you. Here's some additional resources and contacts. So Who Owns What is a repository that lets you look up the owner of your building as well as other buildings that are connected to that same landlord or management company. The Association for Neighborhood Housing Development, which is a great like semi think tank, we might call them. In the area, they have a displacement alert portal, which aggregates a lot of the different information that I've talked about here. So as I do this, I go to HPD and then I go to DOB and then I go and I look at the eviction courts because I really want to get into the weeds and see what the specific issues are. But if you're looking more for a sense of like high level, like this building has a lot of these violations and a lot of that, as a flag to know where there's areas that are have a high possibility for displacement. The displacement alert portal is really useful for that. Then housing court answers, if you are have housing questions or that are not yet at the eviction state, or that you are maybe facing eviction but don't qualify for the right to counsel lawyers, they're a resource. And then I did put just at the end two of the public advocate services in New York that work on housing. So that's Legal Aid Society, Legal Services of New York. There are many. New York's public advocate system is expansive. So yeah. Okay, so I know I ran through that at record speed, but I wanted to just give everybody a bit of a overview and remind folks that we are like here in the office doing this work on a day-to-day basis. So whether that means you specifically have a housing issue or one of your neighbors does, please always provide them with our contact. And we can both, assist them with really direct issues and often also do some background research to see what kind of problems folks are facing in different buildings across the neighborhood. So yeah, there you go. It's 8:05, so I do want to recognize that like we've hit an hour and a half. So I can take questions, but also if you want, if folks are like, I'm ready for my evening, but I'll let the chairs make that decision.
Well, I think we have time for at least a couple questions. That was a lot of really awesome information. So thank you for all of that, Sarah. And yeah, I can vouch for a lot of those groups. I will say a personal favorite on there is the who owns what. You can subscribe for individual buildings, which I do, and so I get like a weekly update actually as to how many 311 complaints or HPD violations, how many, like what's new going on in your building. What's the status, which I personally appreciate. And I can also personally vouch for our fantastic CB14 office. We had an elevator that was out for like 6 months in our building on one side, and after some of us, I mean, I live on the second floor, so I really never use it, but 6-story building, and after a few people were just like, what's going on? How can we possibly get this thing working again? I asked some folks at the CB14 office, how can we do this? And it was working again within a day, because it turned out to be some miscommunication. Our landlord waiting on something from DOB that they didn't even realize that they didn't need. So
Sometimes you just need, it's the equivalent of letterhead or a strongly worded letter. Sometimes somebody who's got an office behind them just needs to make a call. Remind folks.
Yeah. Regine?
Yes, mine is just a comment, not a question, but thank you for this. I feel like it was a peek behind the curtain a little bit, because I've just been on the other end of some of the queries to agencies that you've like really helped, and it's fascinating, inspiring to just see the work that you're doing and the kind of the 360 view you have of the whole picture. So I loved this, more of this. I sometimes I wish in our general meetings that we had more insight into what the district office is doing too, like just kind of like the things you guys have helped residents get through, etc. So loved this feature and hope to see more of it in different contexts. Thanks.
Yeah, it's really sweet.
And I'll jump in even on without even being called on to thank Sarah and staff for all of the heavy lifting, because everything that Sarah just said she does is in addition to the sanitation complaints and the DOT complaints and the streetlights not going on and the other things that happen in the district. It is a busy office with just one district manager, 2 community coordinators, and no budget increase in 20 years. Thank you, Sarah, and a really good presentation.
Yeah, my pleasure. And this will also obviously be on the website. So for folks who weren't able to make it tonight, or if you're like, hey, neighbor, I really think that you should, if you want to see what they do. We also actually have a list of tenant resources on the website, but I'll stop talking now. So thanks, folks.
And all buildings should have a tenants organization next time.
That's true.
I mean, I will say having that elevator out is what prompted a WhatsApp group amongst all 16s here. So sometimes that works. Well, thank you for all of that. Regine, I'm assuming you're good. It's same hand. Okay. Yeah. I think that's unless anybody else has any other questions.
No, I think we have a wrap. So thank you all for coming, and hopefully everyone's enjoyed the informative presentation tonight, and spread the word. We'll be posted, and if anyone missed it tonight, it'll be available for you to view. So thanks all.
Thank you, folks. Have a great night.
Thank you.